Protected Speech with Ravi Kapur and Jonathan Choe.
Along with Jonathan Choe, I'm Ravi Kapur for another edition of Protected Speech, and we're going to get into a topic, we talk about politics a lot on this show, but we're going to start with Andrew Yang, who was a household name really in the last political cycle, but he started a new political party called Forward. It's kind of trying to be the third party out there, which, I think a lot of us would like to see more competition generally, and Jonathan had a chance to talk with Andrew Yang one-on-one. You've done it before, Jonathan. What about his message has changed since he left the Democratic Party to start his own?
Well, yeah, that's the key right there. He was just frustrated with the Democratic Party, and also he's not pleased with the Republican Party, so he's now the co-chair of this Forward Party, and he was in Seattle this past weekend. And essentially, Andrew Yang's claim to fame, really, in my book, was he's the first ever Asian American Democrat to run for the Oval Office. And he was really dismissed early on, but, as the campaign continued, he made some noise. He was known for his universal basic income and also, his prescient call for, America to be ready for artificial intelligence, AI. He was one of the few presidential candidates several years ago calling for America to be ready. And fast forward to 2023, he's here in Seattle. He's touting his Forward Party because he knows a lot of these blue states like Washington, these Democratic-run cities like Portland, Seattle, San Francisco, Los Angeles, they're turning into a hot mess with the homeless crisis, the fentanyl, addiction crisis, just totally decimating our streets. And a lot of it has to do with these failed public policies. And Andrew Yang is basically saying we need to bring the ideals and the hope of the Forward Party at the local level, at these city councils. So, he was in Seattle and he really captivated the crowd. And look, I want to be very clear. This wasn't just a crowd of Democrats or, progressive. It was people on the far left, the far right, the moderates, Republican Democrats. So it really shows that he still has, star power, but it's really his message of just common sense, reasonable values and ideals.
So you had a chance to interview him in Boston back in the day. Did you notice any change after really going through the grind of a presidential campaign where he fell short, of course, and now starting this new party? Has his message wavered at all? What's different about him today versus when you first met him?
Well, I think he's a veteran now. He understands how the American political system works, and that's why, he's really trying to go back to the grassroots local level. And, here's a bit of my conversation with Andrew Yang on the streets of Seattle.
You all live in Seattle. You consider yourselves like fairly up the middle, common sense. Many of you might have been Democrats, as I was, but you're frustrated with what is or is not happening here in the city. Is that a reasonable summary?
Yes.
And what does the Democratic Party have to do in response to your collective frustration and pain and anger? Nothing. Right? Because you are in a blue zone and this is completely non-competitive. If you ran as a Republican in this environment, it's a non-starter. And what I realized is that you needed to start a third-party movement, the Forward Party, not left, not right, but forward, and then create competition in places like Seattle. So I've been in San Francisco, I've been in LA, I've been here in Seattle, and the problems are, unfortunately, right before our eyes, without even trying. Like, I was not seeking out the homeless encampments or the open-air drug users, but you see them, and it's painful. There are a lot of people who are well-intended, but they're very fed up and frustrated with the fact that we haven't been able to solve problems that are driving people out of cities and into the suburbs, or in some cases even out of the state. That's not right. People should not have to vote with their feet to solve these problems. They should be voting people into office who can solve those problems, but unfortunately we have a political system where you have one-party rule in Seattle, in San Francisco, in Los Angeles, and there should be some healthy competition. That's what we're building with the Forward Party.
Got it. Do you believe some of these policies have contributed to the homeless and drug crisis in the city?
Well, you've had a problem that's festered and gotten worse over time. And you also have political officials who don't need to solve the problem to stay in office, because you have blue zones and it's impossible for a Republican to win in just about all these, in just about all these places. By the way, it's true in reverse in other parts of the country. I was just in South Carolina and it's flipped. So the question is, how do we actually bring genuine solutions and energy to the 75% of the country that right now does not have a meaningful choice.
Finally, as a tourist, and you're an outsider, you're still based in New York, right, Andrew?
Yeah.
Would you come back to Seattle with all these encampments and the open-air drug use that you've seen?
Well, I like Seattle, and also I visit San Francisco and LA and other places that have the same problems. So I'll be back for sure. I'm dedicated to trying to help solve these problems. And there are a lot of people who don't have a choice but to hunker down and solve them. You know, like moving away is not an answer. Let's get to the bottom of it.
With so much going on in the news around the country, we want to bring on another journalist with his perspective on what's going on with the news media and just in general storytelling today, because both Jonathan and I are both independent journalists covering different niches, and so is Dave Bondy, who's joining us from Michigan. Dave has been a veteran journalist for many years, and it's nice to get someone from the Midwest to join us since Choe and I, coming from the West Coast, we have certainly different takes, and the folks on the East Coast have a different approach. But Dave, give me a sense of where you see the media today in light of these huge changes, because I know you're very prolific on Twitter the way Jonathan is. I really don't use it much personally for many reasons, but give me a sense of what it is to be a journalist in today's day and age.
Yeah, Jonathan, way bigger on Twitter than I am. He is the king of Twitter. But no, things have evolved. I just quit my job in the corporate media about a month ago. Worked for Sinclair Broadcasting, and I was in the business for about 25 years. Started as a reporter, worked my way up to anchor reporter. I was also our station's digital content manager. And in the past 5 years, as Jonathan knows, with newsrooms are just, especially at the level I'm in a smaller market. Flint, Michigan is market 65, something like that. New York City being number 1, for those of you who know market sizes. And newsrooms are just being decimated across the country. When I left, we had 2 reporters, 2, for all of our newscasts all week. Newsrooms, you cannot even tell basic news with the staff we have. And the companies we've lost people that have went to work at department stores because they're paying more. So the whole industry is in flux. And then you get people going independent. You get Tucker Carlson leaving. The whole industry seems to be in flux right now. And people are gravitating to people, myself, Jonathan, independent creators, and companies, they're losing big market share. I don't know where it's going to fall out, but it feels like a big change is happening right now.
Yeah, Dave summed it up right there. I mean, right now, these corporations, at least the business models, right, that traditional TV, depending on advertising, cable retransmission fees, all of that is starting to crack. I mean, we're seeing the cracks. In many cases, it's now collapsing. And I think, Dave, you hit it right on the head. A lot of this now is independent, personality driven because of these social media platforms like the YouTubes, the TikToks, the Twitters, really giving everyone opportunities and democratizing everything. And you mentioned Tucker Carlson, leaving Fox News, and he makes his announcement. He's bringing his show back onto Twitter. What's your plan, Dave?
Well, here's the deal with me. I am father of 2. I'm the main breadwinner in the family. So I wanted to get out of television, and I did. And I was able to, but I couldn't just leave without a cushion to fall back on. So I was very fortunate to get a job. I work for the Mackinac Center for Public Policy. It's a think tank in Michigan, one of the top ones in the country, focusing on free enterprise. I do their digital, I do their social, but they also allow me to do my own independent journalism, and our values line up on many things. So I'm able to do that on the side and monetize my own content. And in the 3 weeks I've been doing it, I'm up to 500 paid subscribers already. So I'm doing that. I'm going to launch a website soon. And I also want to bring something that is rare, some positivity into the news. And you've probably heard that in the newsroom from viewers, bring us the good news. And, if people aren't going to pay to watch a plane land safely, but I plan on doing some investigative, but mix in some good news as well. Highlight the positive people, because the media watching the newscasts try to make you think we all hate each other. I don't think it's as bad as the media really makes it out to be.
Well, Dave, I'm impressed on two fronts. Number one, that Sinclair is running a newscast with two people in Michigan. It means that we have a much bigger team at Diya TV, as Jonathan knows. So I'm happy to hear that. And also the fact that you have 500 paid subscribers. I'm very happy to hear that.
Dave, what platform are you on with 500 paid subscribers?
Locals.
You're on Locals. Okay. The counterpart to Locals being Patreon. Very impressive. How are you promoting that? Help our audience know what's happening. Because, Kapoor and I, we're trying to monetize this too.
Yeah, and I'm big on Facebook. I mean, I have about 130,000 on Facebook. But the biggest surprise is TikTok. I wasn't a TikTok person. I tried it about a year and a half ago, and I posted some national stories that I was first on, not first, but I was one of the first to post on TikTok, and it just took off. And now I'm up to 500,000 followers on TikTok. And my brand is just being real about things, not always being in a suit and tie. If news would break in the middle of the night, I'd be up at midnight just breaking down some news. But I'm a 500,000 on TikTok, and I have to be very careful, but I will try to migrate them to the paid platform, do TikTok lives and so forth. And I also have a newsletter, Substack, which you've heard of probably. I know that the Twitter files were broke on Substack, but I have 15,000 free Substack subscribers, and I'm using that to push them towards Locals as well, because as we all know, the algorithm is not very friendly.
That's pretty inspirational, Dave. I got to say that. That's a very impressive track record that rivals pretty much all of these media companies that are name brands, many of them that are failed here in recent months.
500,000 TikTok, and arguably one of the hottest video platform behind YouTube, I'd say, or even ahead of YouTube in certain cases.
It's strange. There was a couple breaking stories back in the day, and it went wild. And I guess TikTok, put me out there, and then I really just do little short, quick, either breaking news updates. Sometimes I mix in, family stuff. Not much though. It's weird though how it took off, and I guess people resonate, and they tell me because of me just being real. And when I'm out in public here, it's weird because I would expect people to know me from TV. They do, but many of them are Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. That's when I knew the business was changing. People are like, no, we don't know you from TV. We know you from social. And I'm like,
Wow.
wow, that's really saying something. And in Michigan, we're not as, I say, high tech in our area where I am. Some people are a little slow, like with the locals thing. They don't understand how that works. So I'm hoping to grow this. But yeah, it's frightening that my Facebook lives that I do, some will get 5,000-10,000 views. And our Sinclair newscast, according to Nielsen, our 6 p.m., they would get like 3,000 viewers. So things are changing.
Dave, give us a take on where this industry is going. I mean, Jonathan and I have approached it from different angles. Jonathan's part of a think tank, but has autonomy to cover whatever he wants, but he has a focus on homelessness, and he's just dominating that beat. And then, of course, he's holding the public officials to account, and they don't like that. What has your approach been? What do you make of this whole ecosystem of other influencers and creators? You have some people that are just wanting to put their name out there and get brands associated with them. I see this with sports content a lot. Where are you in this ecosystem? Are you doing a straight news persona? Are you giving context? Are you giving opinion? Where are you in the mix?
Not a lot of opinion. I do give it a little more when it comes to values, and when it comes to politics, I am not picking a candidate. I'm not picking a side. I'm on issues. I'm not picking issues. I'm giving information. Like COVID, there was a story that I'm working on soon. The state of Michigan has not yet released, when it comes to COVID, the comorbidity when it comes to COVID deaths. Like someone has COVID, but they died from this or that. Michigan isn't doing that, and it's digging deeper into things that you really don't think about. And like my former station didn't even have the resources or time to dig into. So, and with Michigan, we are one of the worst states in the nation when it comes to transparency. You cannot legally FOIA the governor or the legislature. We are only one. I think Massachusetts might be the other, where you cannot FOIA the governor's office. So there is no transparency in this state. And I want to try to just hit on that hardcore.
Yeah, FOIA standing for the Freedom of Information Act, that is the lifeblood of any good investigative journalist. But you know, there's a part of me that's excited about social media and the democratization of everything right now, allowing the local yokel citizen journalist to have a voice, to a 20+ year veteran like you. At the same time, we are watching real time this industry that we've been a part of, that in many cases it's all we know, right, in terms of our professional careers, literally evaporating before our eyes. Now, I don't think it's going to completely disappear tomorrow, but we have friends who are literally quitting and going to Amazon PR or the Seattle Police Department PR because they pay double. And at the end of the day, money talks, and we lose some of the best and brightest reporters because of that. What do you see in terms of the future here for journalism? Because I'm seeing a pipeline problem as well. I look to the J schools, and the kids aren't going into journalism.
They're not, and it's frightening. The companies, they need to do something. They need to, well, here locally, and I can say it, I don't work there anymore. They need to pony up and start paying. I'll call them out. Sinclair, they're not, at least in this market. We're not a top 20 market. But we had a weekend anchor position, and I'm going to guess because I don't know exactly, maybe paying $60,000. We went 13 months. We couldn't find a candidate. Back in the day, as a younger man, I would have taken that up in a minute. But the younger people are not going into it, and the ones that are coming out that I've seen, they're not ready. I mean, we had one candidate in. A discussion came up about Condoleezza Rice, and she didn't know who she was. And I'm like, I know you're younger, but you still need to know things like that. So that scares me as well. What is happening at the college level, what they're being taught, at least in Michigan, when it comes to that. It's frightening sometimes, the candidates we're now getting for these jobs. The good people are leaving. We've lost about 20 solid, good reporters. The Detroit market has lost them too. And they're going to, like you said, they're going to public relations. One went to the ATF to be a spokesperson. So we are losing good talent, and it's not being replaced.
So Dave, can you cover the news effectively as an independent reporter? Because if people are following this show, they've seen Jonathan go through it with the public officials, where they're at times not letting him have access. And he obviously is clever enough to find a way to get access. He's unstoppable. But we know all about access journalism. We know how Washington and the corporate media works by and large. But I'm sure the average citizen doesn't have a sense of how all this stuff works. So if you're covering a state like Michigan, which has already obtuse laws on the books when it comes to transparency, do they even respect an email, a phone call request, any kind of request for information from someone like yourself that's not associated with a big brand?
I've been doing this just 3 weeks on my own now, and they obviously know me from working in this state for 13 years, but I did reach out to a public official in the state government and telling them independent journalist, and they wrote back and said, oh, so you're not a journalist anymore. So no, they don't. And if you're
Wow,
not,
dude.
yeah, but I love what you do, and you go right in there, and I plan on doing that. I mean, I plan on, because we are the public, not 1 million people in Seattle, to whatever your population, cannot go to that council meeting. We are there for that. So no, in Michigan and probably across the country, they think of the media as ABC, CBS, Fox, the local newspaper. So no, things need to change. And I did do a story recently about a school that did. A parent sent me a letter that they wanted to the school wanted to know what their third graders identify as, and the parent was upset that was sent out. So I emailed the superintendent that I had dealt with before, and he just ignored me. So I went ahead and did the story on my own, and I said, no comment at all. And then he got mad the next day, and he's like, oh, you actually are. And I told you I was. I'm doing journalism still. I'm just not at the station.
I mean, this is a big issue because it's not just in this country, but this is global, right? I mean, we have all these countries that don't give access to real independent media. And then, of course, now through the COVID period, all the politicians got trained to ignore all of this, right? Let's do a Zoom one-on-one in your face. That stuff doesn't happen. I mean, I just came back from an event where, we get brushed aside because if they don't want to give you a soundbite, they don't want to give you a soundbite. But this is a real epidemic we have because everybody has social media themselves, so they can put out a Twitter video, they can put something out on YouTube and say, oh, well, this is my comment on XYZ, and completely avoid obvious questions. But, this is the nature of the industry we live in. And then, of course, there's a handful of people that are able to get access because they're not necessarily going to ask very pointed questions.
And they're not going to ask those questions because, especially in Michigan, and you said it during COVID, Governor Whitmer, I was not on her list. When she had her news conferences weekly, she had selected reporters. I always asked to be on the news conferences. I was not allowed because I was tough with her at one point, and her staff knew that. And in the media, at least in Michigan, we are not as tough. I see newsrooms, they don't want to upset the powers that be to lose that access. So then you are not allowed to, as a reporter, you kind of know in the newsroom, you can't challenge them like you want to. And I did, and I lost access to her even at the station level. But the station management, they don't want you to upset the powers that be because then they lose access, but you're not holding them accountable. So it's really not journalism.
Dave, at the end of the day, what we were a part of and still are to a certain degree is a business, right? You've got to fund your work. And at the end of the day, these corporate, media conglomerates, they don't want to upset people. But it's our responsibility to hold public officials accountable. Again, to remind all of us, we're supposed to be the fourth estate. We're supposed to be watchdogs, but it's not happening. So, what does that mean for communities when this type of ferocious coverage or, lack of accountability reporting is going on?
It's sad. The community's not getting the information in the state of Michigan and the Detroit market as well. There's maybe one or two reporters in the entire state here that challenge the officials, and not like they probably should, but the people are losing out. They're not getting the information they need to properly make decisions on the people who are in office. Governor Whitmer is amazing about controlling the narrative, controlling the message. I give her credit. She is amazing at doing that. I mean, when her news releases come out, she writes them, and I've seen people before rip them and put them right on the web, and I'm like, no, that's not how you do it. So the public, they're losing out because they're not getting the information they need, and it's sad. Honestly, it is. And I'm glad people like myself and you. I don't know where this is going though. If the companies, they're going to continue to lose viewers, they're going to, and it's going to hurt. And I don't know when they're going to wake up and realize something needs to change, or they're going to continue to lose, and newsrooms are going to shut down. It's going to happen.
Well, keep in mind, a lot of these businesses were built off the fact that there was cable subscribers all over the country, and this was multiplying, and they were able to get retrans, which took a long time. And now people are cutting the cord and going back to over the air plus streaming. And so the business models completely changed. Now we have, even remember, all these sports bundles, even that is collapsing in places like Las Vegas and Phoenix, another market where the NBA team, the Suns, are going back to over the air, which is incredible.
Well, if I can talk about that, Sinclair Broadcasting that I work, they own Bally Sports, which is, they're nationwide, I believe. They have Bally Sports, they do Dodgers, they just filed for bankruptcy. And just what you're talking about is exactly what they're doing. And they put all their money into Bally Sports. That used to be Fox Sports Net, and the whole company might go just because of that deal. And they're experiencing with it in sports. Part of it was bad luck. Part of it, when they bought it, COVID happened. But you're right. The teams, I've read Sinclair has missed payments. Arizona Diamondbacks, they're missing payments on their deals. So it is falling apart. Sports world is as well.
If you were to give advice at this point, I'm just a few steps ahead of you, being a part of corporate media as well for 20 years. And, you just left and now you're exploring this. If you were to give advice to other journalists right now, right, who are in our situations, who are kind of in between, do I stay in journalism, but, I can't do corporate anymore, or do I go to PR? what would you say to them at this point?
It's really personal. One of my, I would say, mentors, Brandy Cruz, she, you know her, we know her. She went up and left. My situation was different. Like I said, I'm the main breadwinner in the family, and 2 children, house, a mortgage. It's different for everyone. If this would have been 15 years ago, before I got married or something, things would have been different. I might have been able to just take the jump. So I'd say it's really personalized. But I urge people who are in the newsrooms to push back, to try to push as much as you can. And if you want to break free, get a plan. I had been planning this for about 3 years to see what I could do and to build my following and to make contacts. So it's the long plan as well. It's not something you just do. You have to really think about it, and personally, because health insurance, all that stuff matters. The salary matters. You have to pay your mortgage. You have to, do those sort of things. So I'd say it depends on the person, but if you have a passion, get a plan together. And it happened with me and it worked out. I do have a full-time job now at the Mackinac Center for Public Policy, a think tank. But it worked out because they're allowing me to do my passion as well. So it worked out. I just say it's really personal.
That's a great point, Dave, because none of the stuff is easy. And again, despite the huge following you have on social, it seems like you're not able to make quite enough of a living off of that. And thus the full-time job helps quite a bit.
Yeah, not yet, not at this point. I've just been doing it 3 weeks, and like I said, I have about 400 paid subscribers at $5 a month. That's pretty good. But I was a main anchor at where I worked. I was our digital content manager, and I was getting paid very well. And the health insurance, medical, it was great. So, and I'm not living beyond my means, but I have to make sure 2 kids. I want to make sure I'm able to save, college, all that sort of thing. And for me, it's different. There's a journalist in Texas, Ivory Hecker. She quit on the air randomly in a live shot. She just quit. But she was single, no kids. She could have done it. I couldn't do that. Some people wanted to say, they wanted me just on the air, just, quit. I'm frustrated. But I had to think about, I guess, take a deep breath and think about everything if you're in the position we are. And if you have a family, if you're younger, I might have done things differently. If I was younger, had no kids, I might say, hey, to hell with it. I'm done.
Dave Bondy, independent journalist and also the digital video manager at the Mackinac Center for Public Policy. Dave, thanks a lot for staying up with us, man. We're going to have you on again, man. Keep us up to date on this journey because it really is a journey that is unknown. But that's also exciting.
And we all need to support each other. I retweet your stuff. You do amazing work. You are making a major difference. You are inspiring people. So I think all of us, we should not be competitors. We need to be a team.
I really appreciate it, Dave. Thanks a bunch for being with us. And I think it's, I'm hoping this leads to better journalism down the line. If we can find a way for independent folks to actually make a living, we can drill down because we've had a lot of newsrooms hollowed out over the last really 2 decades. And so it'd be really nice to have a more localized coverage all over the country. Really appreciate it. Thanks a lot, Dave.
Thank you.
All right, let's move back to Seattle. Jonathan covering stories left and right. This one involving the governor once again. Jonathan, you and Jay Inslee make up yet?
Nope, still banned from his press conferences. But, he just announced recently he's not running again for the governor's office, no 4th term. So it's going to be interesting who the next governor is going to be. It's likely going to be a Democrat since Washington's a blue state. But, I actually put out a tweet saying whoever the next governor is, just recognize, again, pretty much what Dave said. The media landscape is changing. Most of the reporters now, they're going to be young and green and not ready for the market. So the ones who are still around, the ones who know how to hold public officials accountable will likely be independent in many cases. So, I mean, politicians, at least the ones who have a moral compass, right, are going to have to pivot. And they're going to have to be more open to independent journalists. They're also going to have to be more open to philanthropy and foundations backing journalists, think tanks, nonprofits backing journalists. So, just because you're associated with legacy media, at least in my book, that doesn't give you any more or less credibility than someone out there who calls themselves an independent journalist. I think the bottom line standard for me is if this is something you do full time and you get regularly published, you're a journalist. And I want to be very clear, the state does not get to determine who's a journalist. So anyway, that's my spiel for the evening, but big week in Washington. Just a few days ago, Governor Jay Inslee signed a controversial bill, Senate Bill 5599. It's essentially a transgender bill that now gives the state the authority to take in transgender minors or minors who want to, get gender-affirming care, quote-unquote gender-affirming care, whether or not you believe in that or not, or if that's even possible. Yet parents, on the flip side, say, this is insane. The state is essentially taking away our rights. So there's already been a referendum, filed. You've got a group of, really frustrated and outraged parents on all, spectrums here. And also many in the LGBTQ community. And you may be surprised, obviously in the LGBTQ community, it's not one size fits all, but you've got many even trans folk and gays and lesbians who say, look, if you want to be gay and lesbian, trans, fine, but stop targeting minors. At the end of the day, that's the issue, right? Minors, do they really have the ability to consent to gender reassignment surgery or having their breasts chopped off? I mean, that's basically where we're at in 2023. So, Washington, once again, prides itself in being progressive, but you've got critics saying they've gone too far here, especially when you're taking away the rights of parents.
Jonathan, what's considered a minor? Is it just 17 and under, or we're talking 8-year-olds? I mean, what?
In Washington State, 12. 12 and under is a minor. In Washington, if you're 13, here's the crazy part. You basically can say, hey, I don't want to be home anymore, and you have your rights.
Well, let's go to Washington, D.C. real quick for a couple of items that I've been covering. First of all, Ro Khanna, congressman in Silicon Valley, he threw a U.S.-India summit on behalf of the Congressional India Caucus, which has become the biggest caucus in the U.S. right now in terms of congressional representatives. Khanna became the co-chair this year and did like a half-day event, a couple of panels that took place and speeches, and they had a little reception there where Richard Verma, who's now serving in the State Department, former U.S. ambassador to India, gave a speech, and Taranjit Singh Sandhu, the Indian ambassador to the U.S., currently, he also gave a speech. I had a chance to talk to Ro Khanna. We'll play a bit of what he had to say in just a moment, but I do want to bring up another part of this day of festivities, is that was kind of a political crowd, people engaged in Washington. But what was interesting is the next day, FIDS, which is the Federation for India and Indian American Diaspora Studies, they had their own day of lobbying on Capitol Hill and their own reception, where a number of members of Congress, including Barbara Lee, who's a congresswoman running for U.S. Senator in California, who's trying to replace Dianne Feinstein. She spoke. A number of GOP members of Congress were there, and of course, Raja Krishnamurthy, who is the congressman from Illinois. So a lot of folks showed up. So that was kind of the grassroots crowd. That was what was interesting. It was the 2 days of Indian Americans making their presence felt on Capitol Hill. Let me play you a clip now of Ro Khanna in context of the India Caucus. This is the first formal India Caucus event to the public that I can recall. Tell me about how this thing evolved, your role now as co-chair, and where you want to see the caucus go from here.
I'm very excited. We've grown the caucus by 25 members to 114 members, but this is the first time the caucus has engaged a comprehensive strategy to involve the diaspora, to come out here and to have the State Department, the Commerce Department, the military senior leaders like Mattis, the Deputy Secretary of State, Deputy Secretary of Commerce, all there because to listen to the community. And we've had such a vibrant diaspora. Many people here you've seen active 20, 30 years, and none of them have actually been involved in direct communication with officials, and that's what we wanted to do. And hopefully now this becomes a tradition, annual tradition, which the caucus does.
Tell me of all the things you want to get accomplished in this congressional session. What is top of mind for you for this U.S. India Caucus?
The defense relationship. Of course, I'm now a senior member on the Armed Services Committee. We heard Mattis. There's a historic opportunity right now. India sees the vulnerability of the Soviets. They see that weaponry isn't working. They've gone down from 62% of their weapons to 45% from the Soviets. They see the Soviet-China alliance. So this is the golden moment for the United States to come in, say, partner with us, and we have to get over some of the obstacles, allow for production, joint production, some in India, get the price point correct, but I'm going to be working to facilitate that.
After that caucus took place, it was announced that Prime Minister Modi will have a state visit in June to Washington, D.C. I've also been told he's likely to visit New York City as well. But the U.S.-India relationship, again, growing stronger by the day. And, a few years ago, it didn't seem that way, but we've seen just a lot of moves between both parties to move towards India. But Jonathan, any thoughts before we move on to?
I'm thinking right now what would happen if President Trump wins again. In my opinion, quick political analysis, I think India, especially because of Trump's strong relationship with Modi, I think India will once again remain front and center. So in other words, I think India is playing this brilliantly because regardless of administration, at least for the next 5-10 years, India is in a great position in many ways. And I think that's exactly where the country wants to be right now.
I will say this, because Modi and Trump had that Howdy Modi event in Texas, which let's face it, it was a political event. I mean, they walked like arm in arm off the stage. I mean, I've never seen anything quite like it, 50,000 people. And Jonathan and I were both there covering that event and had incredible stories.
And might I add, there were protesters, of course, outside as well who
absolutely
detested
Modi.
Folks
that have not seen Jonathan's reporting on that, go to our Diya TV's Twitter, and that thing went viral globally. Jonathan's report on that. But I will say this: early in the Biden administration, it did seem there was some bad blood potentially. Maybe that's not maybe the right phrase, but there were some folks that were not happy that Modi was so tight with Trump, and it took them, I think, a little while to warm up to the Modi administration and that government, and to get things along to where they are today, where it does seem like the Biden administration, their officials, and again, of course, Kamala Harris being a big part of this, being Indian American herself, it does seem like things have opened up more and more in recent months. And now we're down the home stretch here where Trump is full on campaigning. There are other GOP candidates that we've covered here on this program. And of course, Biden has announced his bid for re-election. So we're going to see a full courtship between all these different diasporas, but the Indian American community being very, very important. Another thing that we've been closely covering on this program, almost exclusively, it seems, is the debate on caste. And the reason we cover it so extensively is I think it has a game-changing, just a kind of a landscape shift for Indian Americans and South Asians in this country. There is a bill on the books that's been proposed by State Senator Aisha Wahab, Senate Bill 403. It's being heavily debated. We had this whole group of people, like something like 600 plus people that gave testimony in Sacramento. We were there on site, broadcast the full event. You guys are welcome to check it out through our YouTube channel on Diya TV USA. But there was also now local level events, town halls that have been, in effect, kind of taken over by folks for and against SB 403. We've been covering this debate extensively, obviously, in Seattle, where Jonathan is. This initiative was passed, this bill banning caste discrimination in Seattle, led by Shama Sawant. Now the effort's coming to California. Obviously, it's a blue state. In all likelihood, I think it's going to pass. But it's gotten very contentious. There are people very riled up. There are hearings all over the place, and people are showing up for and against this. I'm sure we're going to keep seeing this all over the country. Jonathan, any thoughts on this before we move forward?
I just think it's hilarious how most of America is still clueless about this debate. But, I mean, it's clearly front and center in certain cities and communities, especially South Asian and Indian American community. So I'm still waiting for this to hit the national airwaves, but I won't be holding my breath.
Well, that's true. And finally, before we go, we finally want to discuss horrific shooting that took place in Texas as part of our ongoing coverage to AAPI hate presented by the California State Library. We had 8 people that were slain for no reason at all. They were at a mall. And according to some of the early reports, 4 of the victims, at least 4 are Asian American that we know of right now. And it seems as if they were targeted, including an Indian American woman and a Korean family. Obviously, Jonathan and I, being Indian and Korean, we know we have deep connections to these very small diasporas. But Jonathan, I understand you have even a closer personal connection.
Yeah, the Korean American family, tragic, leaves behind a 4-year-old child who survived, I believe. But they were members at a church I attended in Boston, Massachusetts. They passed through Boston and they ended up in Texas. And I was just talking to some friends back in Boston who knew them, and everyone's just in shock right now. And if it truly is motivated by race, I think it just makes this situation that much more difficult to hear. But again, a lot of details and the motive being sorted out right now. So again, the shooter is apparently Hispanic, and at the same time had neo-Nazi tattoos, branded on his body. So just a complicated dynamic. We always assume that, quote unquote, the white supremacists are all white, but in this case, you have at least some initial reports alluding to the fact that this guy may be a white supremacist sympathizer, or at least subscribe to some ideals of anti-Asian hate. So I don't know. This has just been a very difficult time for those who lost their lives, their family and friends, but then to add this race component just complicates things.
Absolutely. And the gun debate continues, like some of these other debates that we cover around the country, and we're going to keep following all these things. So just another terrible tragedy and senseless violence.
And might I add, not just the gun debate. I think a lot of people are now talking about mental illness. We're always talking about the guns, but the guns aren't the ones pulling the trigger. It's the people behind the guns. So I think that mental illness aspect needs to be discussed more often as well.
Well, unfortunately, this segment will continue until this kind of horrific violence stops. For Jonathan Choe, I'm Ravi Kapur. That's been another edition of Protected Speech. We'll see you again next time.